Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to 374 Water's Future of Waste Management event. My name is Lisa Newberger Fernandez, and I'm the Global Head of Sustainability and Ecosystems for 374 Water. And I'm delighted to be joined today by two industry veterans, Corey Knight, the Director of Orlando Public Works, and Sunny. I'm not going to pretend to say his last name in case I might mess it up. Sunny, how do you say your last name, please?
Vishwanathan.
There you go. Heard it from Sunny himself. Sunny is the head of commercialization and business development at 374 Water. This event is part of 374 Water's series called Sustainable Futures. Sustainable Futures is a series that we've put together for practitioners and pioneers who are working on the front lines of waste management, clean water, clean energy, and the circular economy. It's a space for us to come together, to learn together, to ask and answer big questions, and to tackle big challenges like the future of PFAS. Today we have an hour here. I'm going to ask the guys a couple of questions. We're going to have a conversation, but we really want to hear from everybody on the line. So whenever you have a question, please put it into the chat room, and I will be calling up anything that you're asking as we go along. So I'll ask for this again, but please start thinking about your questions as you hear what these guys have to say. So we are lucky to have two pioneers and industry veterans here with us today. And these guys have been engineers and on the front lines of creating positive impact for public infrastructure in the United States for over 20 years each. Corey with the Orlando Department of Public Works and other organizations, including Wilmington, North Carolina Metro Planning. Sunny has been with some of the world's largest water companies, such as Veolia and Suez. My first question for both of you is about what got you into this industry, and even more interestingly, what's kept you in the industry for so long? Corey, over to you first.
Sure, thanks, Lisa. I appreciate it, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Well, I mean, my career is not unlike any other engineer that's out there. You know, we start off. I felt the desire to serve the public and make sure that the safety, the health, and the welfare of the general public are met. And it being through different aspects of what that was. Most of my career has been dealing with either public infrastructure or some type of a transportation or water or development type aspects of in engineering, whether that's working in transportation sector with aviation, or whether it's in water and wastewater facilities, designing those facilities. It's just something that to me, it got me in, because like I said, I had a desire. I'm a problem solver. And I knew there were problems out there to be solved, and I wanted to take those that mission, I guess, that was ingrained in me and use it for the general public, and seeing how we can help throughout the course of what we do as a career. And I think it was pretty important. What kept me in here was, and I'm sure we can all relate to this, is anytime you get through a situation or through a tough project, you say, well, I'm never going to do that again. And then when it's presented to you, you're like, well, I did it last time, so I'll do it another time. And so it's just something that has stuck with me for my career. And when you say over 20 years, it makes me feel old. And I think I'm that old, but we have been in there.
Yeah, well, mine's a similar story.
What about you?
But when I was young, I tell the story to some of the folks who know me from the past. I watched this BBC documentary on TV, and there were scientists and researchers in our industry. They were trying to locate a source of water that was untouched by humans. For me, this was it seemed like a rather simple task, because I assumed all the water we were drinking it for the first time, but that's just not how the world works. We have a finite amount of water on this planet, and any water that we have consumed now has been previously consumed by someone else or an industrial application, or was used for some other irrigation or some other use. So once this fact becomes clear in your head, you have a better appreciation for water and also the profession of waste management. So at that point in time, it was in my high school, I decided that no matter what I do in the future, it would have to be something that positively contributes towards the environmental sector. So well, most of my friends, they graduated with computer science degrees and they moved on to Silicon Valley. I decided I'm going to do something else. I pursued environmental engineering, and I started working as a researcher, focused on things ranging from just water quality, which is key, nutrient management, and of course, later on, resource recovery. And I'm here 25 years or so later, still chasing the dream of a sustainable planet. And hopefully, in my lifetime, we'll see some changes.
That's great. I love that. Chasing the dream of a sustainable planet.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the waste management sector. And my first question is about what are the biggest challenges here? What are those pain points, those things that keep you up at night? And people like yourself, Corey, and people on the front lines of running large infrastructure. And is it about space running out in landfill? Is it about an aging workforce? Is it about aging infrastructure? Other things? What's on top of mind?
Well, the simple question is yes, all of the above, right? And that's, as we take a quiz, when we're in school, we have that answer, all of the above, right? There's several things though that keep me up. Space is one. Listen, space is finite too, whether we like it or not. There's only so much space. We have manufactured space before, right? We've, built islands, and you've seen this all over the world. Places built islands to store their stuff, right? Whatever. And it's funny to me that, if you look at the amount of storage facilities that are going up, there's an abundance of stuff that we have, right? So the space is always finite. It's only so much stuff is going to fit. But the biggest thing that keeps me up at night is two things. You kind of caught on two of those things. One is the aging workforce, right? The aging workforce is something to me that is becoming a bigger issue to me as we go on. Today I had another employee that announced his retirement. He's been with the city, I think over 30 years, I think is what it is. And what we're finding a lot of nowadays is you have that institutional knowledge, and the people that are retiring have these things. They've been working on something for 30 years. They know what button to push. They know who to call when they have a problem. They know how to solve that problem because they've done it for so long that it's become second nature to them. And some of the problems that we have is when we develop the workforce, or in the process of developing that workforce, to try to help bring those who are not as experienced into the workforce, then you have also an issue about trying to get them on board and onboard them so they understand what happens when that workforce is kind of aged out, if you will. The other thing is aging infrastructure. I mean, Lisa, you touched on it. This is something that I think affects all of us and affects, worldwide. We have some infrastructure that's been in the ground for years and years and years. And most of that infrastructure has a design life, and that design life was nowhere near, what we're facing with it right now. So how do you do that? How do you do it with minimal interruption? Because sometimes this infrastructure is in the middle of, communities that it's going to cause some pretty good, interruptions in people's everyday lives, and we want everybody to have a good quality of life, and so we have to take that into account, as well as the money. Where is the money to upgrade some of this infrastructure that is aging, and how do we get to that point? So those are just a few of the things to me that matter, that kind of make me think about, okay, how do we solve this problem in the future? Where do we gear up to get to the point where we can solve some of these issues and get across the bridge, if you will.
Sunny, what would you add to that harrowing list of challenges before we start to solve some of them?
Absolutely. I think Corey nailed it, right? It's all of the above. And I want to add one more to that list. which is population growth. Because as we grow, as the population grows, there's more resources consumed, but there's also more waste that's generated. And compound that with the aging infrastructure and workforce that Corey mentioned about, puts us in a really difficult situation because our systems are not as resilient for all of the changes happening all at the same time. So what we really need to do is find solutions where not only are we recovering value from these resources, from the waste that is, but also capture the valuable experience of the workforce that's retiring or quitting or moving into another an industry, and somehow digitize them such that the know-how is captured within, say, algorithms as opposed to just people, right? That way, when a person leaves, they're not taking all of the information out with no one to replace. But here we have it digitized and part of the solution such that a new person can come in, easily go through the work that's already been done or the work that needs to happen, and somehow have that continuity without any delays or learning curve. I'll give you an example if we have time, but just last week we were at a conference and I was talking to another peer in our industry, and he mentioned that he got a call from a facility asking him what the pressure gauge and manometers were for the mixing system that they were dealing with. And of course, this person quickly realized that they were not even calling the right company. So they were calling the wrong company who also makes another mixer, but they were essentially calling him to find out how to fix a problem of a infrastructure that they owned for 30 plus years. So that lack of digitization and just still relying on just the analog features that we are left with, I think that's and that's not another challenge that we absolutely need to overcome in order to bring the next generation of people into our workforce.
Interesting,
And
you're
Sunny,
talking about, go ahead.
sorry, Lisa, let me add on to that because Sunny's right. The digital space too is something that's of concern to everybody, right? There's space physical, and then there's the digital space, and that digital space costs money too, right? And that's something that we all have to be cognizant of, and is going to continue to be a problem in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about circularity, and in this case, circularity of ideas and knowledge, and how to capture that and how to bring it back and not lose it when people leave. That's a fascinating way to apply the circular concept. And you've mentioned a number of problems. I wonder if you could share some examples of where you see cities tackling some of these challenges well. When you think about aging infrastructure and aging workforce, examples that come to mind of tackling these.
Yeah, sure. So, there's several things that we try to do. We try to, one, be a little bit more proactive, right? There is some instances, and I use this terminology, there's some instances where we've kicked the can down the road, right? And we're at the end of the cul-de-sac and we need to figure out what we're going to do now, right? But some of them are fairly simple. We do a lot of slip lining or a lot of lining in our pipes to try to get a little bit more age out of the pipes and try to help us, with some of that stuff, especially in our our wastewater, our water management, our wastewater management, stuff like that. But a certain amount too is just looking toward new technology to help us understand where we can effectively and efficiently spend that money. And when we talk about the digitization of these things too, that's going to help us try to figure out where our weak points are in our systems, and try to help spend the money the wisest in those certain situations too. And that's what I see is a big promotion of some of this technology, and why it's so important to kind of mix into our everyday work too. When we talk about this, is that can really help us as a planning tool, right? To go forward, to plan better for the future, to plan these situations where we need to figure out where to spend the money, right? What's first out of the gates. Also, in what we've tried to do here is low impact development got a big way, for us to kind of do. And we've been looking at that more to try to, to say, hey, what makes sense? Where are some issues that we can improve maybe water quality before it gets to our endpoint, right, of this, of our whole train of water treatment.
Yeah, so I'm going to take a slightly longer approach to answer this question because Lisa, you mentioned something which is still stuck in my mind about circularity, right? We talked about the circularity of knowledge, but also, of course, our resource. Thus far, what we have been doing as civilization is, we have a very linear approach to managing our valuable resources. We take, make, use, and dispose, which typically ends up in a landfill, believe it or not. Even plastics, which we think we are recycling, is really ending up in a landfill. That's where it's going. What we really need to be thinking of is how to make, use, collect, transform, and reuse. So the reuse component has to replace the take part because that becomes part of our circular resource recovery process. And this is true in our industry, right? I mean, this is true across most industries, but specifically in ours. For example, phosphorus is one of those finite elements that I talk about, even though our process does not currently have the mechanism to recover it specifically for bringing it back as a product to the agricultural use. But that's a resource that we absolutely need to recover from our sludges as opposed to mining. We talked about landfill, which is where most of our waste ends up. That's another challenge because over the past 20 or 30 or so years that I've been in this industry, the number of landfills in the US have considerably shrunk. So from the 90s up until now, more than 80% of the landfills have closed down for good, which means we have far less land available for for taking your waste to landfills. So one might wonder, we are in the US, we have so much land, why can't we just permit more landfill? And that's because nobody wants a landfill in their backyard. I don't think anyone on this call would voluntarily say, I want to put a landfill in my backyard. I want to do it too, because it's not the way we should manage our waste. That really is the opposite of a circular economy. That is where that's a cradle to grave, where it ends up there and it never goes away, right? If you're going to encourage the next generation to participate in our profession, in our industry, that's going to help us, combat challenges with climate change or clean water and affordability and renewable energy, we need to start thinking about it in a more holistic way, because the next generation of folks realize it far more than the older generation. And again, I'm not going to shoot myself in the foot because I'm part of the generation. In that, they understand the reasoning for us to be more sustainable. They understand the benefits of digitization because they grew up in an age where, a laptop or a cell phone has always been a part of their life, right? So less dependency on landfill, more digitization, more reuse potential, both on the water and the resources, and of course, innovative technologies. I wouldn't be here if it weren't the case. That has to be all part of the mix, part of the solution package for us to meet the demand of the future waste management.
And I think, Sunny, to add on to that, Lisa, when you talk about, the circular and what to do, you talk about the phosphorus and even the nitrogen too. Because to me, we have to be mindful of that nitrogen, phosphorus, what happens, because we want to mitigate that, in our lakes and stuff like that, because it helps us when we mitigate the nitrogen and phosphorus. We want that load low, right? So there's this whole thing that we have to think about. Everything works together, right, in our economy, and kind of not only our economy, but a global scale as far as what we do in the local economy too, of how we deal with all this in our waste management and what we do with these things that are left over. And so I think that's where, some of the technology, some of the forethinking, right, of the next generation will say, hey, here's how we manage some of this. We manage it more effectively by doing this instead of this over here. So I think that's a big challenge as far as what we have coming up is how to make that circular economy, what I want to say, but also the goods, the services, the products, the byproducts coming around, how we make all that work together.
So this is fun. I'm going to give you a magic wand for the moment and say this magic wand gives you unlimited funding. You don't need to worry about where's the funding coming from. You can invest in anything to tackle these challenges that we've been talking about: aging infrastructure, aging workforce, circular economy, NIMBYism. Where would you put your investments in a way that you think would make the biggest difference in addressing some of these issues?
Well, we look right now as far as what we've done here in the city of Orlando. We've looked a lot about digital twins, right? And we've got a couple companies here that are looking for the metaverse. I'm sure we're all familiar with that, and how we deal with the data and how we manage the data and what we do with the data. And as far as digital twins are concerned, there's a certain aspect there if I know what's going to happen and I can have something, I can test out this thing to a digital twin that'll tell me, hey, here's the result. I see a lot of information coming out of there, good information that we can take and use, and it's going to help save us money. So it's funny, talk about the magic wand of unlimited funding, right? Which we all would love to have, right? But a lot of the trouble comes in sometimes is it is the funding, but sometimes it's not so much the funding, it's the interruption of and I'm going to go back to this, it's the interruption of the quality of life sometimes that causes sometimes more of an issue, right, than some of the funding does. And so if you have a way to kind of, test that out before it gets there, and we understand, hey, here's a solution that this showed based on this digital twin, I think that's going to help us a gigantic amount in the future, and kind of how we deal with some of this stuff. I think as far as the digital or the magic wand is concerned too, I think the way we manage this infrastructure too in the future, and how we kind of build for what we're doing in the future. If there's new technology out there for materials, is there stuff that we haven't wandered upon yet? I think a lot of the money needs to go into the research, as far as we've used this stuff for 50 to 100 years. We've done it this way. Is there a better rabbit that we can pull out of the hat, or is there a better widget we can build to help us manage some of the waste management we have coming up in the future too? Is going to be another big aspect of that.
Yeah, I mean, to add to what Corey mentioned, of course, is if we do have a magic wand that we could just wave and things go away, we need to look at fundamentally how we have been functioning in our industry over the past 100 years or so, right? I mean, innovation is not exactly, we do have innovation in our industry, don't get me wrong, but if you look at what we have that's commonly used in our industry, most of these technologies come from other industries. For example, centrifuges came from pharmaceuticals, dryers came from the food and bev industries, and membrane and ultra pure water comes from the medical industry. So we have taken those technologies that were widely used elsewhere, and we're bringing it into our waste management industry. It's not because we don't believe in innovation. It's just that we usually wait for a proof of concept before it helps investing that taxpayer money into infrastructure development. And I'm completely on board that we need that. But it's also a catch-22 for us in a way, right? Because we have technologies, but if you have to install it, there's some inertia that we need to overcome. And if you don't have installation, most of the people have the inertia that they don't want to use the technology because it's too new for them. So we need to somehow strike the balance there, and also look at how we fund these projects, right? There is a lot of money right now out there for, say, addressing emerging contaminants, right, in our drinking water as well as in our wastewater. But how this money has been dispersed to the 50 states really is not, in a way, equitable, because there are states like Maine where they have a ban for land application of sludge because of the concern with PFAS. But then there are other states where they're freely applying um, biosolids, even class B biosolids in many instances, onto the land, and they have the exact same PFAS in their waste too. So should the money go to someone who's willing to invest in an innovative technology so that they could be like the benchmark or they could be the test subjects and they're willing to take the chance? Should that be the place where the money is invested? So really, the change in perception is what I would hope for with the magic wand more than anything else at this point in time. Of course, I do agree with Corey 100% that if you have a digital twin, we are able to do a lot of those, mitigate a lot of those risks of innovation and new technologies, because you could play on the virtual world before we are able to simulate. I mean, do the same thing. We can simulate on the virtual world so that we can realize it in the real world.
And let me say too that, going back to the first question about the aging workforce or whatnot, that's another thing that, I think that if I could tell the younger generation, hey, listen, there is space here for you. We desperately need you in this industry, because there's things coming up that we really haven't explored to its fullest potential yet, right? And so there are things out there like the digital twins and all this other stuff that's going to open up new positions, I guess, for lack of a better word, that we hadn't had in the past, right? Of in our industry, and so it's an exciting time to be in here. It's also new that we're having to explore a little bit of the gray instead of the black and white that we're all used to as engineers here going forward.
That's a powerful concept, Corey. It's like the putting the man on the moon of waste management at this time. So if you think about the challenges here, what would be some of those man on the moon or getting us to Mars concepts that might attract more young people to come into the sector? What are some of these big bogeys that we have out there?
The big things, some of the big things are actually, quite honestly, most of the simplest, right? Because when we think about that, a lot of people there's a misnomer out there that our industry is dirty, right? And it is. Does it? Yes. Does it? I mean, I think Sonny, you and I have talked about it. At the end of the day, what is it? It's poop, right? I mean, some of the stuff that we have to deal with in sanitary sewer. Yes, it's stuff that you don't want to think about, but it's the application of what you do with this stuff and the understanding that, hey, listen, this is not a dirty industry, right? It's a very critical industry to all of us, because not only in that, but what we throw away too, right? How do we deal everything that we deal with that is a throwaway, that I would say that we have to in turn, deal with in the public works sector, can be viewed and has been viewed as a dirty job or not a good paying job. But I would argue that, there are some instances or some positions where you could do very well, at what we do. So I think that we got to get over the hump, I guess, Lisa, for a lack of a better term, and we have to be better as industry leaders to selling our industry, right? And we've never been great at the engineer is always the boring engineer that sits behind the desk and inputs numbers here and gets outputs here and tells somebody what to do. But I think the innovation of what the future generation wants to see is, I want to be at some place that makes a difference. I want to be at something that allows me to be creative, and I want to be at something that pays a decent salary. And I think we can offer all three of those in instance in our industry in some form or fashion, that will help propel us forward and to get more people in the industry. But we all together, and this is not just us three here, but anybody that's listening on here, we've got to do a better job at selling our industry to those who are coming upon new into this.
Yep.
This is great. I'm going to give you a chance, Sonny, to make waste management sexy. And then we're going to turn to some audience questions. We've got some great questions coming in.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to point out that, most engineers, including myself, we are not very good at marketing, I suppose, because if you think about it, our profession was called sewage engineering or sewerage engineering. And the first folks who decided that we are going to create clean water from poop called it toilet to tap. So we are really not selling it to people. We are not making it exciting. The minute you add toilet before your tap, nobody wants to drink that. But the fact that we have been drinking water that has been recycled 1,000, 10,000, a million times uh, is in fact, you're pointing us in the wrong direction by saying it's coming from a toilet. All water comes from the toilet, in my opinion. So we need to better market ourselves. What we are doing is exactly the same as a worker in any other industry. They take a resource, they convert it into something that we all want. And that's exactly what we are doing. In fact, what we are creating, water, by the end of our process, is the most essential component for life. So we got to do a better job of selling it, no doubt.
First question from the audience is going deeper on the circular economy question. And it's saying, one of the challenges with the circular economy is the cooperation from the public. So people participating in the circular economy and how to drive awareness of that. And what are some of the ways that you think could inspire the general population to participate more in generating a zero waste circular economy?
That's a great question, and that's something we spend a lot of time here, with our communications and outreach in our marketing group here, is to try to tell people, hey, listen, this is everybody's problem. This is not just our problem in the industry, right? And it's something that from a mindset perspective of the end user, right, or of the consumer, and we say this here quite often in the city of Orlando, is be mindful of what you use, right? And we have the, in our wastewater industry, we have the 3 Ps, right? You can only put the 3 Ps down the toilet, and that is poop, pee, and paper. And what we mean by that is toilet paper, not any other kind of paper. And what you would find out is a lot of our money and time and expense is spent on cleaning out some of our lift stations from these rags and from the flushable wipes. And everybody thinks, oh, this is great. But it's something that we all, need to be mindful of, and we need to be sales, and we need to, it's the sales mentality, right? If I am a good neighbor, I am telling my other neighbor, hey, here's why this is important. When the question is asked, why is it so important that the city says don't blow leaves in your, gutters or whatever, whatever we do, is because of this is the end result, stuff like that. So it's our responsibility to educate the public, and we want the public's responsibility to take that and educate each other while we're out there. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. And again, I look at that as the question is applicable to everyone, but the answer is very geographical. For example, someone on the East Coast, like I live in North Carolina. For me, drought is not a thing. But when I go out west and hear what they have to say in the conferences and meet the folks there, water's on their mind. Drought is a real thing for them. So they have a different challenge, though. So they are able to adapt some of the newer concepts faster there than folks here. But with that being said, we all have a role to play, right? Because our challenges here may not be necessarily the same for the folks elsewhere. We just need to understand what is that is pressing for your community, and come up with plans and essentially market it as a way of how we could collectively get to the end goal. I'll give you an example again. In the US, we tend to add food waste into our landfills. It causes greenhouse gases. It's just not a very sustainable way of doing it. But if you separate the food waste going into a landfill, you could divert it into like an anaerobic digester and produce some energy. So there's some potential for recovery of resources from just that fraction of the waste that you throw into your bin. We always complain that this is impossible for some country as big as in America to do, because it's the perception, the storage of the food before we send it to put it in a different bin and then take it to an anaerobic digester. But that's all excuses that we make because it's not convenient for us. That's the real fact. We just like to put it in the incinerator and it goes to a wastewater plant and we aerate it, which is the exact opposite of what you should be doing to recover the energy, because now we are pumping in energy to treat it. I've seen countries with far less resources able to collect this food waste and actually produce resources from it. So, we have to understand that there's a inconvenience that's going to be part of the solution. If you're not willing to be slightly inconvenienced because this is how you've been doing it all your life, then the problem is only going to get compounded as we grow. So it's a bit of public participation that they need to understand that there's going to be some inconveniences, but for the greater good, especially for the next generations to come, it is something that we absolutely need to be willing to sacrifice a bit of our current lifestyles.
Interesting, because what you're saying essentially is that a lot of these technologies exist today, but they're not being adopted at scale to solve the problems that we're talking about here. So I wonder what do you think it will take to drive adoption of some of these technologies that do exist? And a question from the audience on this very topic is about waste to energy projects. And the question is, I'm surprised that I don't see more waste to energy projects around the country. And as the technology does exist, what's stopping the adoption of these projects?
So,
Yeah,
oh,
go
sorry,
ahead, Sonny. Go ahead, Sonny.
Oh, no, because it was a technology question, I thought I'll jump in first, but Corey, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
So I'll give you an example, Lisa. So whenever you have a new technology, of course, we want to vet it out. We want to make sure that it actually works before you implement it at scale. And I'm totally on, all for it. You got to crawl before you walk, before you run. That's why I'm actually proud that our company 374 Water is scaling up in a manner that actually allows us to test completely a system at a certain scale prior to going to the next scale, because this is how you ensure that as you scale up that you are reducing the risk for the end user. That's number one. What in terms of technologies, it takes nearly about 10 to 20 years for a new technology to be fully appreciated in our industry. I'll give you an example. Again, thermal hydrolysis was a thing in Europe before it came to the US. Nearly 10 years ago, DC Water implemented this technology, which was at that point in time the state of art. It's nearly been 10 years, so it's not new, but it seems like it's old news now, simply because it's become a part of it's a staple now in the intensification of the digestion process across the US. So people are more willing to accept new technology only when it gets old. So in a way, it is it's a challenge, because we want those innovative technologies in the market. We know we have technologies that can take waste and convert that into valuable resources, especially energy. But the perception and the slow the inertia within the market is pretty high, because what we are dealing with is not an industrial private money. We are dealing with taxpayers' money, so the risks are greater for folks. So they tend to be a lot more conservative. But it's totally possible. Right now, we do have technologies. Not just in the anaerobic space, but also in ours, for example, the supercritical water phase, where we are able to take waste, convert that into clean water and energy. And we are doing it in a way that's probably the most elegant way of doing it. But then, we are a new company. We do need those reference base before it will be widely adopted into the rest of the industry. But it's only a matter of time, but we'll get there.
And I think to kind of hit on this too, and Sonny said this too, and we're a very skeptical society, I would say here. We want to make sure that everything works before we put any of our resources into it, and that's well founded, right? We all understand that's the way we want. We want to be mindful, especially us in the public sector. We want to be mindful of the taxpayers' money. If there's taxpayers' money involved, we want to make sure that the taxpayers are if you will, getting, you know, a good return on what they have invested is us, and they rely on us to make sure it's done. The technology is out there, and it's been out there for a while, especially when you talk about energy conversions. You know, there are some places, especially in Northern Europe areas over there, that are doing a lot of the food waste to energy, or biogas or something like that, conversion to where they can utilize it in the grid. I think Denmark does it quite often, in their gasification of food, you know, food to energy. Some of the problems too, and it's in a, I was going to say it's a localized too, because when we talk about, I know Sunny said something about food waste, right? Well, you know, it's really inconvenient you know, to handle. We do a food waste to compost, you know, here at the city, but it's really tough to get everybody to wait, I got to take it out where? I got to put it in a bag. I got to keep it under what if it's 99 degrees and, you know, 90% humidity outside? How long is that going to sit out there, right? Yeah, if we're in Florida, right? So there's that kind of inconvenience, if you will, of hey, you know, we want to do this, but it, once again, takes adaptation and it takes cooperation for us to all understand what the end goal is. And so I think that it's an important place to get to as far as our energy conversion, and it's something that we have to do, but we have to put a little bit more stress on it being important, you know, in our everyday lives, to see that kind of come on a full scale or a larger scale than it is right now.
Think about this adoption of technologies and adoption of new behaviors at the consumer level, at the end user level, where you've seen this work well in the industry. And if you can think of an example where something has changed, where behavior has changed and it's worked well, and what are the lessons that we can take away from that experience? If you can think of a good one.
Well, I think I'll use a composting thing, food composting thing, right? Some people, and we have some people around town, they love this, you know, composting thing. They have a little, I think it's like a 3-gallon bucket, might be a 5-gallon bucket that gets picked up by a company, and they take it and compost it. There's some other areas around about composting. That's, you know, we leave a little on the table about energy conversion, but we do have, you know, compostability and that kind of thing. And once, you know, I've heard several stories saying, hey, I love to use this. This is a great product. I've gotten used to it, right? This is kind of how we've done it, so I can make this go. And I think, you know, to a certain extent, we could all get there, right? We could all get to the point where we can see the benefit of this, but it's kind of that learning process, and it's that training process to train yourself to understand that. So, you know, Lisa, specifically, there's a few things around there, but I think in general, if we can kind of get to the point, I think you're going to start to see some major breakthroughs, you know, with technology and where we get to once we kind of all have adapted or adopted these, you know, these new ways of doing things in our own daily lives. Because it's a daily, it has to be ingrained in a part of your daily thinking, or your, you know, thinking in everything that you do, that I have to be mindful of what I waste, or, you know, what I'm throwing away or what I'm not using, and how can I use that in other situations.
Building on what you're saying, there's a question that just came in, going a little bit deeper and with an example. It says Billings, Montana recently approved a mechanism where the public is charged for waste pickup based on how much waste they discard. And the city compared it to water use, where not everyone pays the same fixed amount every month. Do you see that concept catching on to encourage reduce, reuse, and then recycle after that?
I mean, a lot of concepts can catch on. That those are always tricky ones, right? Because, you know, they fall in sometimes as the people tell you how they feel when they vote, right? And sometimes, you know, we come across those things. Do I think it's something that we're going to have to tackle? Probably in the future, yes, absolutely. Because when space becomes, and it's the same thing with how this comes around to the economy, right? If I don't have enough storage facilities, I'm probably going to pay more per facility, right, to store my stuff than a place that has an overabundance of space, right? I think the same thing is going to be in our own society, right? We have to put a value on how much that space is. It is to a certain extent, but sometimes when it's still easier to throw something away than it is to, you know, to deal with it or recycle it, it's always going to be cheaper, if you will, to do that. but I do think we're going to have tougher conversations about something like that specifically.
Yeah, it goes back to the inconvenience aspect to me, because pay to waste is basically what Billings is trying to promote, I suppose. Is if you have a lot more in your bin, you're going to pay a lot more. So you're trying to reduce the amount of waste, but that is an inconvenience, right? I mean, right off the bat. So while some might want to participate in something on at the scale, there will still be a lot more resistance, and we don't want this to have unintended consequences. People tossing the trash on the side of the highway, things of the nature. So as a society, I think that's a larger question. That's a good experiment, no doubt. I would like to see how it works out. Would it work everywhere? I would imagine it can, but the likelihood of it being widely used across the US, to me, seems like wishful thinking. I would want it to happen, but I, I I don't know if that's the approach that's going to be best for what we are trying to accomplish, which is a circular economy. Now, with that being said, we could learn from this and maybe better utilize the waste that we collect from our end, right? Like, if we look at this waste as a resource in our industry, why would we not want that resource coming to us as opposed to it being diverted and going elsewhere? I'll give another example. We did a project in Hungary a long time ago, where initially the food waste was being brought to a wastewater facility, and they were paying a tipping fees to deliver this waste to the wastewater facility. So the wastewater facility was making a revenue stream. But this concept picked up to a point where the fourth largest power generation in all of Hungary, the country, was through biomass to energy. So a lot of so they essentially were creating wastewater plants as a factory to create energy. So a lot of this food waste was then diverted onto those very specific power factories, and they were paying money instead of asking the waste producers to pay money. So there was competition created to a point where this waste became valuable enough that we would bid out to purchase waste from the producers. So it is, again, as a concept, we need to understand that, if we burden the end user, the likelihood of participation on a larger, grander scheme may be in jeopardy. Maybe we are jeopardizing those larger opportunities because of smaller changes. So rather than trying to change everybody's mind, we should change the minds of the end management folks, such as ourselves, so we are better prepared for what's coming, as opposed to just going after the other 330 million people.
Yeah, and I think, Sonny, that point, and Lisa, to further this question too, because that was I mean, it's a good concept, right? And as far as, hey, we'll just charge more. But like Sonny was saying, there's some instances where that might not be the best. It might not be the best solution, right? And I think that's, the overarching thing is it's very localized, right? For one thing, is what's the space, what's available, and also what do you do with it, and how are the mindset of the general public there? Because Sonny's right. If somebody gets too frustrated, then they're going to go find a space to throw their trash, right? And that's definitely not what we want.
Yeah, unintended consequences. So, Corey, we've talked a good amount about the finite space. We're running out of space in landfills. And can you spell it out for us if you think about that issue for you in the city of Orlando? Like, what are the implications of that in your case, and what are the ways to deal with that?
Well, to us, our landfill around here is managed by Orange County, Orange County Public Works, Orange County Utilities. And the thing for us is the cost factor, right? Where do we throw our waste away? Who do we pay to take our waste? Because even at the city's level, we don't own the space. We're not authorized by the state, Florida statutes to have our own place to bury trash. So we rely on others, to take our trash. And that's something that is near and dear to us because we say, hey, listen, this is a cost involved to us. So it pays us, to be mindful of how much space is out there and try to, if you monetize it, right, what monies are we paying to get rid of our stuff? And if we have less, stuff to get rid of, that's the solution, right? So, because it's not necessarily about a charge per ton, right? When we come to think about it, it's what are we doing with that waste that we have, so we can manage it more effectively on the back end. Kind of what Sonny was talking to there. So yes, is space limited? Yes, space is limited. It's limited in our solid waste disposal, but it's also limited in our biomass, if you will, that's left over from water reclamation, other things that we have to deal with. It's a space issue. The more residents that are moving to our great city of Orlando, the less space there's going to be naturally, right? They're not making any more space. So we have to do a better job managing what we have.
I was wondering when the four-letter word of PFAS was it's going to come up, and a question has come in, which I'm going to pose to you all, and then we're getting close to wrapping up here. But the question about PFAS is essentially about what are your thoughts regarding accountability for PFAS? Is it more with the producers of PFAS, the chemicals at the beginning? Is it more with the manufacturing of products with using the PFAS? Is it more with the disposal of the PFAS at the end of life? Like where does accountability sit, and how are you thinking about what we do about PFAS at the moment?
I think I'll go first here. I totally believe that if you produce PFAS, you should be responsible for it until, the cradle to grave concept for especially the kind of recalcitrant waste. So I would necessarily not believe that taxpayers should be burdened by problems that they didn't cause or knowingly cause. But with that said, unfortunately, in our industry, the end of pipe is where things get to get concentrated and things get to be penalized. A classic example is when we were trying to fix the Chesapeake Bay here on the East Coast. Even though wastewater plants were not creating phosphorus or nitrogen, that was resulting in algal bloom and fish kill in the Chesapeake Bay. It was mostly the farmers, but obviously you're not going to go after farmers and tell them that, hey, you can't fertilize your land because how are they going to grow crops? We get penalized because it's the socialization of penalties, in my opinion. We all get penalized because somehow as a society, we allowed for this to happen. Farming, of course, we need industrialization of products we use PFAS on a day-to-day basis, so we are consumers, so we get penalized. So unfortunately, we are going to be held with a bill of cleaning this product, even though we didn't make it. But there is absolutely work. There is absolutely work being done right now, so that the producers of this waste are also held accountable.
Yeah, and I think to further that, what Sonny's saying is whether we like it or not, we all have to deal with it, right? I mean, that's the bottom line of what we have is, I think accountability wise, we each need to take a little bit of accountability and say, hey, what's the solution, right? And that's where we're at right now is we're in the solution making, phase. What's the solution? What do we need to do? How do we go forward? We know that it's probably going to be, there's going to be some tougher restrictions coming down the pipe. I think we're an ostrich with our head in our sand if we don't, acknowledge that. And so, to take what's the best way to eat an elephant one bite at a time, I think we just got to kind of get through it and try to figure out what we're at in the end.
Corey, you definitely win the award for the most great phrases, the most catchy phrases. Um, so now it's time for the lightning round, and the question is one thing that you want people to remember from today's session. I'll start. Something that we've talked a good amount about is how adoption at the end of the day is the barrier to technology, and innovation is only as good as the adoption of that of that innovation, of that technology, and it's consumer adoption, corporate adoption, government adoption. It's about behavior change. So fundamentally, and if you want to make a change out there in some big way, think about how you're going to drive adoption of that change and what's in it for people to do that. Sunny, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to have two things. One is what is finite, so we have a huge responsibility to care for it. That's fundamental for me. I mean, that's why I'm here. But as a technologist, it'll be unfair if I didn't say that if we don't move forward with innovative solutions, we are really moving backwards.
Cool. And Corey, you get the last word.
I get the last word. Okay. Well, I think, and you kind of said it, innovation. Don't stifle innovation. Make sure that we provide a space for innovation to flourish. It's something that we have to do. We have to look into the future of that. And I think the other thing is just the freedom to explore, right? And it kind of goes along with innovation, but I think more so is if we don't allow ourselves to think outside the box and test out, kind of, hey, here's not what we need to be looking at. We know we have a problem. We need to find a solution. So what are those solutions? And let's think outside sometimes the traditional box that we put ourselves in.
Well, thank you. I want to thank the audience for being so great at coming up with really good questions throughout this session. Thanks for tuning in and participating, and to anybody who listens post event. We're grateful for your participation. I want to thank the amazing speakers, Sunny and Corey, for taking the time and sharing your insights and your pithy wisdom with us. And I also want to thank the team at 374 Water who made this event happen. People like Deron who worked on this, and the broader team who made this possible. So thanks everyone for tuning in and participating in 374 Water's Sustainable Future series. Take care.